hello. I was going to let Buddy co-host today. You haven't seen him in a while, but he wanted to go outside, so Phoebe agreed she would co-host today. This one's actually going to be a pretty quick opening because I got a lot of stuff from Hawaii to show you. The summer turned into a mixed up bag of stuff. Our original plans fell through. We scrambled, and since it was Gail's vacation, I asked her where we wanted to go, and she said we want to go to Hawaii. I said, oh, okay. So we spent a few days in Oahu, about a week in Kauai, had a great time. Let me show it to you now. I hope you enjoy it, at least partially as much as we did. Let's start out on Oahu with a bird I've seen fairly often before, but never up close. The white tern. Some know it as the fairy tern. They love these monkey pod trees in Waikiki. These terns are known for laying eggs and raising chicks right on the bare branches without any nest at all. Pretty dangerous way to do it. I'd seen them flying in from the ocean around the hotels in the past, but I was able to capture them flying around these trees in the park, a little closer. There are many introduced species in Hawaii, such as these common waxbills from Africa. Outside of seabirds and shorebirds, it can be hard to find native birds, but I'll show you some later. As you might guess from the name, these cute Java sparrows are native to Indonesia. I'd seen them in Puerto Rico, though. They're also escaped caged birds there. I was guessing cattle egrets might be native, but nope. They were brought in the 1950s to control agricultural insect pests. Red-vented bulbuls are released cage birds that have actually become agricultural pests themselves, feeding on fruit and orchid crops. A visit with Gail's cousin took us over to the east shore of Oahu. It's very pretty over there, and as you'll see, there's some good birding too. Before I could do any birding, though, we had to visit the famous Halona blowhole. The wind noise in this video prevents us from hearing the kind of breathing sounds it makes as the waves suck in and out across the blowhole. But you can still see the surf push up through the spray almost like a Yellowstone geyser. Zebra doves were imported from Australia about 100 years ago, and boy, have they taken over. They were easily the most common dove we saw, but the next bird is the most common bird. Just a quick look at a myna. I'm tired of looking at them. If I showed you them all, we wouldn't have time for anything else. Red-crested cardinals are pretty common too, but they're just a little prettier and somehow not as irritating as the mynas, which are so noisy. The cardinals are originally from South America. I began to get excited when I could see these seabirds soaring over the ocean near the blowhole. I should have studied better. I couldn't see any markings, couldn't really see the long tail, though I thought it must be there. I wasn't sure what it was. Later, I got a chance to look at the photos on my camera, and I realized what an idiot I was. Of course, these are red-tailed tropic birds. The Union Jack and the Hawaii state flag is interesting. That's your homework. Look it up. Manana Island, also known as Rabbit Island, off the east coast. This is an important breeding location for red-footed boobies. Supposed to be a few masked boobies there, but I couldn't find any. Here are some red-footed boobies cruising by. Black on the wingtips, but no black on the tail, no black mask. They must be red-footed. That's not a disappointment. Red-footed boobies are pretty birds. Enough of the seabirds for now. Let's talk ducks. The Hawaiian duck is an interesting species. All the ducks on Oahu are reported to be hybrid ducks with mallards. Only Kauai is reported to have original Hawaiian ducks. Here's a photo of one of the ducks on Oahu that gives us a good opening for some discussion. This duck was a little smaller than the others it was with, so small size goes in its favor. Its tail is just a flat, pointy down instead of the turned-up ducktail of a mallard, so that's another point in its favor for being a Hawaiian duck. It has a dark bill, but there's still a little lightness around the tip, so it might be a mallard gene or two in there somewhere. It's got somewhat of a white eye ring, but not as bright white as eBird shows them to have, so at best this is a mostly Hawaiian duck with some mallard genes, I think. I've got another picture a little later in this video. We'll revisit this topic. Spotted doves are native to Southeast Asia and India. I don't mind seeing them here in Hawaii, though. I think they're pretty. Here's yet another released caged bird, a yellow-fronted canary, stubbornly refusing to turn around for me. Gail's cousin took us on a visit to the Lyon Arboretum at the University of Hawaii, the Manoa Garden. Here at the Arboretum, I was finally able to get my camera on a warbling white-eye, what used to be known as a Japanese white-eye. We also found another bulbul, the red-whiskered bulbul. I'm a little more familiar with these. We have them in LA at the Arboretum here. I was also finally able to get my picture on a bird we'd seen and heard flying around, the rose-ringed parakeet. Parakeets are funny. For as loud as they are, they have the knack for getting into the trees in a way that they're hard to take photos of. Perhaps needless to say, these are also an invasive species, found originally in India and Africa. Here's a little treat I found at the Arboretum. The bird on the left is a juvenile white-rumped shama. The bird on the right is its mama. I first noticed it when the juvenile flew into the tree, its white rump and white wing markings jumping out at me. And here's a quick shot of the male white-rumped shama, although the backlighting made focus impossible. This is the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, located in the Punch Bowl. What a beautiful sacred place. Soon it was time for an exciting part of the trip for me, my first trip to Kauai.
Gail had been here before. This is the ocean outside our hotel, which was on the south shore. Some days were calmer than others, but we always seemed to have some wind and some waves going on. Here's something fun to watch, a green sea turtle. At a beach in a park in the town of Poipu, the sea turtles come in the evening to rest. A small portion of the beach is set aside, roped off, so people leave the sea turtles alone. But they swim right through the snorkelers and bathers and climb up onto the shore. It's a lot of fun to watch them. One morning, a storm must have just passed through early in the morning before we got up, before we found this lovely rainbow waiting for us. The storm that morning had made the water pretty choppy, and that was the only morning we saw a lot of shearwaters from the shore. It's a little hard to follow them on this jumpy clip, but most of these, I believe, are wedge-tailed shearwaters. Here's a picture taken from the video of that bird in front of the boat, which almost certainly is a wedge-tailed shearwater. A few of the shearwaters were brighter white and a little smaller than the wedge-tails. If I'm right, they're Newell's shearwaters. These birds rivaled the myna for most common on Kauai, the red jungle fowl, or chicken. You can see a big male with a female behind him in this clip. You may have heard me gripe about wind on some of my other videos. There was plenty of wind on Kauai too. Here you can see this red-crested cardinal getting blown around. When this fellow started mowing the lawn at the park, egrets flew in from all around to see what he'd stir up. Maybe get a little breakfast. I was lucky to find a local guide, Mandy Talpas, to take us up to Waimea Canyon and look for indigenous birds. Those are getting harder and harder to find on the islands. Mandy was a super guide, and I'll give her contact information at the end of this video. She's really great. On the drive up to the canyon, we came across this flock of African silverbills, which I knew as warbling silverbills when I lived in Puerto Rico. Let's digress a minute and talk about bird names. I just found it hilarious that the name warbling silverbill had been changed to African silverbill when, not that long ago, the name Japanese white-eye had been changed to warbling white-eye. What's up with this? I'm going to have to do a video about bird names. I know I talked about changing people names of birds, but there needs to be some more clarification besides just that. Here's a real treat, a short-eared owl. In Hawaii, they're known as pueo. These shots are all taken from a vehicle, so not the best I've ever done, but not too bad for the circumstances. I enjoyed seeing it a lot. Waimea Canyon is pretty spectacular, as you can see. Mandy brought us up here in the morning. She said it tends to get socked in with clouds and hard to get good views in the afternoon, much like Haleakala does on Maui. Here's the best thing about Waimea Canyon: white-tailed tropic birds. Though their diet is fish, they tend to nest here in the canyon, perhaps to get away from the frigate birds. Tropic birds are such magnificent creatures to watch fly. Seabirds in general, tropic birds, terns, albatrosses, just beautiful. Falcons may set the speed records, but I just love watching these seabirds. This is a nene, one of the birds I most wanted to photograph on this trip. On the next clip, Mandy explains how they were almost eradicated.
Was collected, brought into captivity for breeding. We had less than 50 individuals with flying goose. We lost almost all of them. So with all of these introduced predators, with people over harvesting, people were still hunting.
This fence was erected by the Pacific Rim Conservation Foundation. It protects nesting shearwaters and petrels. At the end of the video, I'll give some information for them. Okay, you'll have to bear with me for my Hawaiian bird pronunciation on these next few pictures. The Kauai ele paio, I think I got that, is a small gray wren-like bird with similar species on several of the islands. The pictures aren't very good because it's small and moves so fast through the dense foliage. This last picture is probably the best, but not great. It appears to be looking at the camera. The best clip I was able to get of an apapane, unfortunately, turned out to be a brown juvenile. The apapane were eating flowers at the top of these tall trees. I got a few pics with showing the red adults, but not very great. These were even tougher, the anianiao. Let's pause a minute on this picture of an anianiao and talk about their decline. Warmer temperatures have allowed malaria-bearing mosquitoes to reach higher up into the mountains, and on Kauai, they can reach the full island. This has decimated Kauai's native bird populations. In preparing for this trip, I watched some presentations on YouTube on Hawaii's native birds, and it'll break your heart. Because the songbird photography was so difficult on Kauai, I'm going to sprinkle in a few birds from our trip to Maui in early 2023. Starting with this Chinese Waimea, which is one we heard didn't see all that well on Kauai on the Waimea trip. Another skulky bird we heard well but never even really saw was the Japanese bush warbler, which I was fortunate to photograph in Japan several years ago. On the island of Maui is the national park for Haleakala Mountain. This is a beautiful park and a great place to see native birds, so I'm going to show you a few of those. Haleakala is a beautiful park even without the birds. The top, you can see the clouds form. It's a thing, if you will, to go up there at sunrise and watch the clouds build during the day. Like the ele paio, there are several species of amakihis spread throughout the island. These were fairly easy to find on Maui. Perhaps the most famous Hawaii honeycreeper is the iiwi. They've been really decimated on Kauai, but they can reach higher elevations on Maui, at least so far. I've seen the apapane on 3 islands now, Kauai, Maui, and the Big Island. But boy, I don't know why I can't get a good photograph. I just can't. I didn't catch the name, but I believe the next spot we went to was the Kauai Waterbird Sanctuary. Here are some coots and stilts, which leave themselves open to naming again. I'll save that for another day. Oh, I can't help myself. Notice the white shield on this Hawaii coot is bigger than that on a typical American coot. That's why it's called a Hawaii coot, and it's supposedly a separate species. But the shields on the Caribbean coots are big like this one. Is this a Caribbean coot? I don't think so. Let's revisit the subject of ducks. Our guide Mandy, who seemed pretty darn smart to me, seemed to think that the birds we saw in this location were mallards, or at best mallard hybrids. Colorado State University had studied the ducks here on Kauai and said there are purebred Hawaii duck populations here. In fact, one thing I thought was funny is the duck they show on their webpage is a dead ringer for the duck I showed you earlier. My thought is if there's mallards on Kauai, then it's just a matter of time before the whole population is mallard hybrids. These common gallinule are considered the same species as those on the mainland. This Pacific golden plover should be in Alaska now. Here's a better picture of one I took on Maui in January, which looks a little less scraggly than the one in the video. There was a large group of nene at this sanctuary, maybe 4 or 5 times what I show here. Okay, time for another highlight of the trip, the Kilauea Lighthouse. The lighthouse had a large red-footed booby nesting colony. This is just a fraction of it. The gray birds at the top of the tree are the juveniles. The white birds are the adults. At the end of this clip, an adult booby flies into the right side of that tree, and you can see his red feet pretty well. Here's a beautiful, if hard to follow, video clip of a white-tailed tropic bird. You can see its markings pretty well on this clip that were hard to see on the Waimea Canyon clip. So I'm going to put in a few photos that show those beautiful markings too. Here's another fun one, a great frigate bird. This is a female with the white around her neck. Males are all black. The great frigate bird has a green sheen, unlike the magnificent frigate bird I saw in Puerto Rico and Mexico, which is more purpley. Here are frigate birds roosting on an island there. The one with the white head is a juvenile. This is probably a little hard to see, but it's interesting. The frigate bird at the bottom, that is essentially all black, you can see a little red line on its throat, which is a fold of skin. This is a male frigate bird, and they will blow up that fold to a big balloon to attract females during mating season. Wedge-tailed shearwaters nest in burrows around the lighthouse. To the left of those roots on the right, you can see one of the wedge-tailed shearwaters. Here's a wedge-tailed shearwater in a burrow that was quite close to the walkway. You can see a little bit of the handrail on the lower right. This is an unattended egg in a burrow. I imagine the temperature is warm enough that's not a huge issue. Here's a shearwater that chose to lay an egg right next to the lighthouse. They had signs to keep folks away, but I have my doubts how well that will work. In case you're wondering, my camera zooms well. Here's some tropic birds that seem to be missing their long white tails. Have you guessed what they are? That's right, they're red-tailed tropic birds. Here's some photos that show the red tail a little more clearly than the video does. Lace and albatrosses also nest on Kauai, sometimes in neighborhoods. There's some near the lighthouse, though, too. You could see the nesting albatrosses in what looked to be a protected area off to the side of the hill, so we didn't have to patrol the neighborhoods and disturb anybody. I can't resist more nays. Although they're related to Canada geese, they just seem so much prettier. We spent our last exploring day at the Allerton Botanical Garden. They had lots of streams and waterfalls, and we were told we could find purebred, genetically pure Hawaiian ducks, but we didn't find any. We did find another invasive species, the bullfrog, which, according to most of the articles I could find, were brought to Hawaii as a food source, frog legs. Finally, one last invasive, a male white-rumped shama, looking a little more in focus than the last one I showed you. Here's one last beautiful feature of Kauai, the spouting horn blowhole. I guess because it's a little calmer on the ocean this day, you could hear the blowhole better than we could hear the one on our island.